She's an assistant professor of political science and international studies at Stonehill College, and she's currently in Boston. Doctor, thank you for your time. I want to start off with an interesting tweet you posted 5 or 6 hours ago. It goes, how am I supposed to teach about international politics in a minute without breaking down? Talk about the actual role international politics, in theory, should play versus what you see in real life.
Yeah, it's funny that you're talking about this tweet. I was talking to my students about what's happening, and we've been talking about, emerging powers, violence, World War I, World War II. How does it escalate into a conflict so quickly? And I always bring up the example of what's happening right now, that we are seeing a situation where we're questioning the world order that was put in place after World War II, systems, the UN, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, are being questioned by the country that pushed for a lot of these legal frameworks to exist, which is the United States. I know you were asking your guest earlier about how people view the U.S. and its role in the world. And we see that the U.S. is the only country right now that could help stop this from escalating further, because we're now going to be trapped in a cycle of response and reaction to that response that could continue for a long time. There are talks among the extremist circles in Israel about attacking nuclear power, like nuclear facilities and capabilities of Iran, which could lead to a dramatic escalation in what's happening. And the only country that has the influence and say, to some extent, at least through military aid, at least through providing weapons and support, is the United States. Now, it is questionable how much the U.S. has been able to pressure Netanyahu to change course, since there haven't been really taking any actions to show that these threats or these proposals would be supported with a threat of actually cutting aid or conditioning aid to Israel.
Let me just start this next question by saying I believe there's a consensus that no one has agreed or supported Hamas's attacks on Israel on October 7th, around that time. But do you think the U.S. is really the adult in the room, like a previous guest stated? The U.S. has a history of intervening in other countries' politics. U.S. officials have recently said that they are not seeking diplomacy with Hamas at all. They want a change in the leadership in Gaza. But, if, for example, if I, from where I live, talked about U.S. politics publicly, I would probably be shut down. Not shut down physically, but I have no say in U.S. politics, and I can't dictate or suggest who should be running for power. The people there should do that. Do you think the U.S. is really taken seriously when it recommends how another country or territory should rule its own people or should run its own government?
So with the U.S., there's geopolitical interests that come in play as well. Iran and the U.S. have had a long contentious history in the region. But in terms of rationality and adult in the room, I think in general, the U.S. has always stood behind Israel. Since Israel became a state in 1948, they've supported it initially economically and then militarily. But we see that the decisions are based on calculations of who are allies in the Middle East, and we see that it's not just about Hamas. We live in a context of post 9/11 world where terrorism, the framework for terrorism, the U.S. has its own set of approaches to responding to terrorism, and there are legal frameworks that are very strict and are in place to talk about these incidents. So the U.S. even set up that response. Any country, I think, want to be able to respond in ways that it sees fit after any attack on their soil, or they view as a threat to their existence, or any possibility of retaliation, or like to save image. And that's what we see. We see that when calculating toward Israel, it's not just about human rights and what rationality is as we calculate it. Rationality in this terms, it's maintaining a geopolitical dominance that exists in the Middle East, and the presence of Israel as this ally of the United States, but also Israel has allies now within the Middle East, including with the Abraham Accords and normalization agreements with the UAE and other countries, that we don't talk enough about how these countries are not even using any of that leverage to stop any of this from happening.
We'll leave it there for now, Doctor. Really appreciate it speaking with you. Thank you.
Thank you.